to do an introduction question with our panel, and I'm going to open it up to all of you. So do participate, put your hand up, and you'll get the mic. So let's do that. But first, I want to say, you've been labeled Rosa Parks of Saudi Arabia. Tell us a little bit about the story of how you've gotten involved in so many activism issues in the country.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be called Rosa Parks. I think the name has a lot of responsibility. It's very humble. Really short story. I moved to America 12 years ago. And, you know, I went to school, I had a life, and married American. And my husband wanted to learn Arabic, and he wanted to be part of the home conversation. So we went back to Saudi Arabia, and I went into a situation where someone called me a racial slur. And it was really, you know, shocked, where people feel entitled to push me because I'm black and they will take my place. So the fact that I went in public and I asked people to share if they had similar stories, and I was shocked with how many people went through that. And we started a campaign to raise awareness, and it's not okay to push people because they're black or whatever, you know. And people like started, and I noticed it's not just racism, there's a lot of form of discrimination, especially against people with disability or something. So that's what, you know, started Adam Project, which basically promote diversity and inclusion of all.
Phumzile, you grew up in an apartheid state, you became a teacher, you moved into politics, became the deputy president of South Africa. What is this story? I mean, what drove you to where you reached and then to UN Women and the UN?
Yeah. Well, context really in my case, because when I was a young person, believe me, I was once young, in South Africa, apartheid was the all-consuming issue. And as young people, it was easier to be part of the struggle than not to be. And I think probably something that I always remind young people, being part of youth organizations meant that you were always part of conversations that were larger than the things that were personal and important for you. And that gave me an opportunity to learn to lead, to be in a team, and to develop goals, and the rest is history.
Well, the rest may be history, but it's this drive that you're putting with He for She campaign and the necessity to drive the investments that are required to actually make the economics of making women's lives a little bit better. Run us through what is required in terms of investments, numbers, member states, private sector participation. How is it going to work?
You know, for the first time in the world, I feel we have an expiry date for gender inequality. In the sense that when we look at the 2030 agenda and the goals that have been adopted by all the countries of the world, private sector participated in identifying those goals, civil society participated. So it's a broad agreement, the biggest and most comprehensive agreement that the nations of the world have ever agreed to since they adopted the UN Charter after the Second World War. And in that, there's a strong emphasis on what it would take to attain gender equality. It's very specific. Address unpaid care work. Millions of women are trapped in unpaid care work because of absence of affordable childcare. Address laws that are barriers. 155 countries have got those laws. Provide digital and financial inclusion. Millions of women would be affected by that. Address gender-based violence. Almost 1 billion women live with violence. Now, this is also not too much to ask by any women anywhere in the world. It's actually doable. And of course, education remains important. Ending child marriage becomes important. So there's really chunks of very specific things that between now and 2030, preferably before, we can do, and we can turn the situation. And wage equality, also very critical.
Nawal, how do you translate that to the Saudi Arabia story? Because we heard from Lubna yesterday about how women in Saudi are breaking perceptions. How do you see it?
I think as a woman from Saudi Arabia, we definitely are, we have a lot of hopes. We want more, and I think some of the things we want is really common, like a lot of women in other countries, such as, you know, what she mentioned about childcare, maternity leave, time for nursing mom. And also, for me, I think the glass ceiling need to be, a little bit increased. What I mean is that you will see a lot of women working in secretarial jobs, and I'm looking forward to see more in leadership position.
Questions, anybody? Not yet, but here's a question for both of you. When you look at these various campaigns and all the rhetoric, I mean, everyone wants to talk about supporting women, wants to talk about changing legislation. 50% of the population of this world is, being questioned on almost. When you look at the UN Charter, do you think it's actually having an impact on the ground? And is the money going to the right projects? Because that becomes another question.
Well,
so I spend a lot of time thinking about how to help people change. And I believe when it comes to women, it has to start from us. Whether I'm a woman from Saudi Arabia, that I believe that I should be driving a car. So to have that mentality of focus on the solution, not the problem, and really, how do you change? How do you induce change? How to bring change? And I think the best way to do that is really to find what is in it for the people who are opposing you, how to reach across the aisle, how to bring them in. I think it's not about we against them or me against them. It's really how to build bridges. How can I persuade a person who believes that a woman shouldn't be allowed to drive to see it's really actually a good idea and it's not as threatening, how to overcome these barriers. So I think it's really important for women, number one, is to understand I have to change. I have to change the way I look at the problem, the way I handle this situation. And also I have to reach out to the other person and persuade them to see how what I'm proposing is really good, not just for me, but for them as well.
Phumzile, you've said it's important to get men on board. I'm quoting you here. Feminism is not about hating men, hating those who don't buy into our agenda, but it's about extending and advancing women's rights and ending deep prejudices. So do we all end up doing what the women in Iceland did a couple of decades ago? They went on strike. The entire country, half the country went on strike, including cooking at home. And it got them equal rights. The men folded. Is that the conversation? Or does it need to be a little bit more subtle now?
no, that too, and much more. But I think I want to go back to the issue of investment because it is a big issue. There is underinvestment in gender equality. The resources that are invested in gender equality are really crumbs. What we give to girls in countries where girls and women eat after men have eaten. Only about 10% of the resources that are required by many national plans to be fully implemented that address gender equality are funded. For the rest, a minister or whoever drives the program has to see what they have to do. And
what's the global amount that's actually needed? Is there a target figure?
Well, McKinsey has said if by 2025 we will be able to generate about 12 trillion US dollars back into the global economy, we need to invest about 3 trillion. And that would be in changing legislation, in investing in health, in investing in access to technology, in investing in entrepreneurship. And again, all of these things, you put the money in, you get a very high rate of return. And also they identify the interventions that can impact girls anywhere and everywhere in the world so that you can actually get a global surge of the number of women that you can empower. So investment in women and girls is actually a win-win for the country. It's got a rate of return, it's got numbers. It's actually possible to do it in short.
You know what, Nawal, here's a question for you. When you live in countries where diverse kind of populations, different colors, different races, how difficult is it to get governments to focus on minorities? I think this is a challenge being faced across the world in different countries, especially with this resurgence that we're seeing.
Right. I think it's once the government or let me start, for example, if you're talking about women.
Let's talk about Saudi and
right.
what you're seeing.
Right. I think one of the things that I try to do is that show the role model, show that Saudi women who went to America and were able to be successful and came back home with a degree, and how much they contribute positively to the country. And I think there is this change that people start seeing, yes, I guess women can do things. And it's kind of like amazing that people really didn't see that. However, I use social media a lot, and I advocate for few topics. One of them is women, and why it's important to have female or women head of departments in different hospitals in high-ranking positions. One of the arguments that I say is that men have been running the country for so long. Give women a chance. Maybe we can cut down on the spending and end corruption.
We're pretty
gotta try something different.
The Japanese would tell us we are good at managing the money. But
right.
Here's a question, and the final question, and make it. It's just a quick question at the end. What can women in this room? Oh, we have questions in the audience. Can we get a mic there? Better than my question.
Hi.
Just very quickly, because we're literally out of time.
Yeah. For women to take the lead on helping other women, they also have to know that they are what they contribute and what they bring. And some of us spoke earlier about something that most women suffer from, an imposter syndrome. So can we start by asking other women, and perhaps Phumzile, in your work with the UN, how much investment goes into helping women at our level understand that we have something to contribute and what we contribute? Because that's when it goes down to the grassroots.
Yeah, maybe not enough, because the prejudice that you are fighting is prejudice from men, but it's prejudice that we also bring to the table. Investing in ending prejudice is probably the biggest elephant in the room. When we invested what has happened in the 20 years of implementing the Beijing Agreement, one of the things that was universal across all countries of the world was the depth of prejudice towards women, from women and by society. So it is not a small thing to pay attention to. It is actually a game changer for us to, something that we need to pay attention to.
And real quick, for us as women as well, we really have to be sensitive to the language. There's, people describe women as catty or don't prefer to work under female supervisor, that kind of stuff. This is not true. I've seen that today and yesterday. Every single person I met, they're very supportive of having women in their work. And I think that culture had to change, that actually we love working with women and we can do great things together. And I think that's how I end.
It's an amazingly inspiring story of both Nawal and Phumzile. Please do reach out to them. They will be in the audience. They'll be outside as well, because the inspiration and what we can do with the UN and with your organization, Soundheart, is plenty. I'd like to thank you both for coming in, giving us your time. We're so very, very grateful.